Hi there, this is part 2 of graphing equations in slope-intercept form. So we're on the bottom of page 132. Okay, so now in order to graph an equation in slope-intercept form, the first thing you need to graph when it's in slope-intercept form is your y-intercept. This number is where your line crosses the y-axis. So the first thing is graph this number on the y-axis, right on the y-axis. Then from that point that you graph, you're going to rise and run your slope, the number next to your x. Okay, so let's take this first one and try that. Okay, so this says graph the equation y equals -1/2 x. Okay, so step number 1 is graph your y-intercept on the y-axis. Okay, so now just make sure that you look at how your graph is counting. This is counting by ones, so we can count the lines by ones. We're all good. Okay, so now here is your y-intercept. There's nothing there, so that means your y-intercept is 0. So start with 0. Graph 0 on the y-axis. Now, from that point, you are going to rise and run your slope. This is your slope. The top, it's already a fraction, so the top number is how much you're rising, the bottom number is how much you're running. From your y-intercept, from this point, you're going to rise 1 and run 2, but notice it's a negative slope, so your line has to be going down. One of the moves that you make has to be a negative move, either left or down. So if we're going to rise 1, we go up 1, and then because our slope is negative, I'm going to run 2 to the left. I'm going to go to 2 to the left. So I'm going to rise 1 and run 1, 2 to the left. Again, I'm going to rise 1 and run 2 to the left. Okay, or from my y-intercept, I could go down 1 because it's negative. I could go down 1, but then I have to run 2 to the right. I could go down 1 and run 2 to the right. Either way, when I connect the dots, I will have a negative sloping line. This slope is negative, so my line has to go down from left to right. Okay, so let's try that again. Let's look at page 134, the top of page 134. In fact, let's do this one. No, let's do this one. Okay, so let's do another negative slope again. So now let's graph this equation. This is in slope-intercept form. So now look at how the graph is counting. This time your graph is counting by 2's. 2, 4, 6, 8, 2, 4, 6, 8. That's a -2, that's a -2. So every line's counting by 2, so I have to be very, very careful with that. Okay, again, folks, the first thing you graph is your y-intercept on the y-axis. Okay, again, there is nothing there. So that means my y-intercept is 0. So I have to graph 0 on the y-axis. Okay, now, from that point, I'm going to rise and run the slope. Well, my slope is not a fraction. Remember, rise over run is a fraction. So I just need to make it a fraction by putting a 1 underneath it. So my rise is 5, my run is 1. Again, it's negative though. So my line has to be going down from left to right. So one of these moves I have to make negative, meaning I could rise 5 and run 1 to the left. So from here I could rise 5. Well, look, it's counting by 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Rising 5 would be right there at 5. And then I'm running 1 to the left because it's negative. Well, if I run 1 to the left, that's right here. That's right here, halfway, 1, because the next line would be 2. Again, I could rise 5 and run 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rising 5 and running 1 to the left. See how those dots line up? Or I could go down 5 and run 1 to the right. So I could go down 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down 5 and run 1 to the left. Or I could go down 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and run 1 to the left. Okay, so that, either way, all my points should be linear. They should line up and form a straight line, and my line should be going down because it's a negative slope. Okay, so let's try this one. Now this one is a positive slope. So my line should be going up from left to right. It should be going up from left to right. Okay, so let's graph this. Again, the first thing you graph in slope-intercept form is the y-intercept, the number at the end. Okay, so now look, again, there is no number at the end, so that means our y-intercept is 0. So I'm going to graph 0 on the y. And this graph is counting by ones. Every line is counting by 1, so that makes it a lot easier. We could just count lines. Okay, so I graph the y-intercept, which is 0 on the y-axis, and now from this point, I'm going to rise and run my slope. My slope is 3/5, so I'm going to rise 3 and run 5. I'm going to rise 3 and run 5. So I'm going to rise 3, go up 3, 1, 2, 3, rise 3, and now run 5 to the right because everything's positive. So I'm going to go up is positive and to the right is positive. So I'm going to rise 1, 2, 3 to the right and run 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, rise 3 and run 5 to the right. See if I connect the dots, my line's going up from left to right. Now I could actually make both of these negative and I could go down 3 and left 5. Down is a negative and left is a negative. So down 3 and left. And see, look, a double negative forms a positive slope. So either way, I am still graphing a positive sloping line. Okay, let's try one more. Let's go back to page 133. Let's go back to page 133 and take a look at number 8. Okay, so now this is asking, is this graph correct? We have y equals negative x. Y equals negative x. Well, look, that negative next to the x represents a negative 1. So this is a negative slope, and so this line should be going down. This line's going up. So this graph is not correct because this is showing a positive slope when it should be a negative slope. Okay, so now if we were to graph, if this graph extended and we were looking at this whole coordinate plane, so again, you're going to graph your y-intercept, which is 0, so 0 on the y, but this time my slope, my rise and run would be negative 1 over 1. Remember, if it's not a fraction, you make it a fraction. So my rise over run would be negative 1 over 1. Make it a fraction if it's not a fraction. So I'm going to rise 1 and run 1 to the left now because my slope's negative. So I'm going to rise 1 and run 1 to the left. I'm going to rise 1 and run 1 to the left. I'm going to rise 1 and run 1 to the left. So my line should actually look like this for this equation, negative sloping line. This is not correct. Okay, I hope that helps.